China just slammed the brakes on its companies investing in the United States, and honestly, the timing is almost too perfect. While Trump is out on the White House lawn, ranting about tariffs, waving papers around like he's still hosting The Apprentice, China is making a cold, calculated move. This isn't a tantrum, it's a tactic. For years, the narrative was all about China trying to gain access to U.S. markets, pushing to play in America's sandbox while Washington acted as the gatekeeper. But here in 2025, the script has flipped. Now it's China saying, no thanks. And they're doing it with the kind of long-term strategy and discipline the U.S. just doesn't seem capable of anymore. Today, we're diving into why China is cutting off investment in the U.S., how it's executing the move, what the numbers look like, and why Trump's economic aggression may be shaping up to be one of the most embarrassing economic miscalculations in recent American history. Trump has spent months ramping up tariffs, reviving his old trade war playbook, and dialing it up even further. He recently announced another sweeping round of tariffs on Chinese imports. But instead of retaliating with the usual tit-for-tat, China went a different route, one that's far more strategic. Beijing instructed its regulators to halt all approvals for outbound investment into the U.S. No more green lights for acquisitions, joint ventures, or expansion plans. This directive came straight from the top, aimed at shielding Chinese firms from political and financial risks in what has become an increasingly hostile American environment. Let's put some numbers on it. Chinese companies invested $6.9 billion in the U.S. in 2023, a figure already down from previous highs. With approvals now frozen, that number could plummet to near zero in 2025. Not because of market forces, but because of state policy. The sectors affected? Pretty much all the heavy hitters. Tech, logistics, renewable energy, real estate, entertainment, and finance. That means no more co-produced films in Hollywood, no luxury real estate acquisitions in New York or San Francisco, no joint R&D in Silicon Valley, and no expansion deals for companies like Alibaba or Tencent. It's not just a withdrawal of capital, it's a withdrawal of trust. Make no mistake, this isn't about revenge. It's strategic decoupling on China's terms. After years of seeing its companies blocked, scrutinized, and vilified in the U.S., Xi Jinping's government is making it clear it won't allow Chinese capital to be treated like a national security threat and continue propping up American markets at the same time. This freeze is also a bargaining chip. Heading into trade talks, China understands a basic truth. Money talks. And while $7 billion might seem like a drop in the bucket compared to the size of the U.S. economy, it hits hard in highly targeted sectors, especially at a time when the U.S. is struggling to attract foreign capital amidst rising domestic fiscal pressures. It also sends a clear message to Chinese companies. Don't expect protection if you gamble on unstable, politically charged environments. Operate where you're respected, not just tolerated. This isn't retreat. It's redirection. While Western media may frame China's investment freeze as weakness or withdrawal, what's really happening is a pivot away from markets that are hostile and unpredictable and toward regions that actively welcome Chinese capital. Instead of pouring billions into Silicon Valley and Wall Street, China is doubling down on Southeast Asia, the Middle East, Africa, and parts of Latin America. These moves aren't symbolic, they're backed by real money. Infrastructure projects in Kenya, smart cities in Egypt, AI labs in Malaysia, clean energy in the Gulf. It's a strategic rebalancing driven by long-term vision. Beijing understands that power today isn't just about armies or alliances. It's about logistics, infrastructure, and influence. That's why it's building new trade corridors across Eurasia, expanding its control over global ports, and integrating emerging markets through digital platforms and energy grids. In other words, while America is fighting yesterday's trade wars, China is quietly building the foundation for tomorrow's global economy. Every deal signed outside the U.S. is another thread in China's expanding web of global influence. And let's be clear, this isn't about charity. It's about securing access to raw materials, reaching new consumer markets, and gaining geopolitical leverage, all while sidestepping Washington's regulatory minefields and political theater. The U.S. is still playing checkers, focused on winning the next news cycle. China's playing chess, thinking 5, 10, even 20 years ahead. The message is unmistakable. If you don't respect Chinese capital, you won't get it. If you weaponize your markets, don't be surprised when the money flows elsewhere. This is what global maturity looks like. Not loud confrontation, but quiet, strategic reallocation. While U.S. officials are busy yelling about tariffs, China is targeting something far more foundational: the flow of global trade. Take CK Hutchison, a Hong Kong-based conglomerate. It planned to sell 43 port terminals worldwide for nearly $23 billion in a deal led by U.S. investment giant BlackRock. That included terminals at both ends of the Panama Canal, a key global choke point. But at the 11th hour, China's State Administration for Market Regulation stepped in, launching an antitrust investigation that effectively froze the deal. They didn't block it outright. They didn't cite politics. They simply used regulatory tools to assert pressure. And the message couldn't be clearer. Strategic assets like ports at the Panama Canal don't change hands without Beijing's consent. When Trump talks about reasserting U.S. dominance over global trade routes, China is now in a position to calmly and powerfully say no. Trump's tariff war is already shaping up to be one of the most economically self-sabotaging policies in recent memory. Prices are up. Markets are down. The Dow dropped nearly 2,000 points in a single day, not because of China, but because of the uncertainty Trump's policies have injected into the system. American farmers are facing retaliatory tariffs. Exporters are losing access to what was once their most reliable market. U.S. companies are landing on China's export control list, with dozens more added in recent months. Trump says this is about making America strong. But in reality, it's accelerating the decline of the very industries he claims to protect. American competitiveness is being choked by chaos, while China is simply letting the U.S. stumble on its own. While Beijing enacts targeted, measured investment controls, Washington is in disarray. Inflation is high. Consumer debt is hitting records. Wealthy investors are retreating. And no one in D.C. can articulate how tariffs are supposed to solve any of this. Warren Buffett is sitting on $300 billion in cash. Hedge funds like Citadel and Millennium are underperforming. Even BlackRock, deep in a stalled port deal, is now caught in a geopolitical tug-of-war it never asked for. And instead of offering a coherent strategy, the U.S. is pointing fingers. From Hollywood to tech, agriculture to finance, entire industries are waiting for direction. All they get is Trump yelling at clouds and promising greatness while the ground shifts beneath him. This is what real power looks like: quiet, calculated, precise. Trump is performing for the cameras. Xi Jinping is executing a global transition in how and where capital moves. And the world is watching. Europe, Africa, Latin America, they're all paying attention to who brings stability and who brings chaos. Right now, China looks like a long-term partner. The U.S. looks like a political liability. Pulling billions out of hostile markets and redirecting them into cooperative ones? That's not retreat. That's winning smarter. So here we are in 2025. China isn't reacting to U.S. policy anymore. It's setting its own. It's pulling back capital, shielding its companies, and doing it all with purpose, precision, and patience. Trump, meanwhile, is stuck in a rerun, ranting about tariffs, undercutting his own economy, and pretending there's a plan. But the world sees through the noise. The real shift is happening quietly from Beijing, and it's changing the rules of global economics, one controlled decision at a time. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned, there's more coming, from China's expanding trade networks to how it's restructuring global finance without saying a word.